which is great. So thanks everybody for joining. I'm going to try and keep it to sort of an hour if possible. If we need to go to the hour and a half, we will. Appreciate everyone's got a lot to do. So we'll try and be as concise as possible. Hopefully everyone's got the agenda, which is sent round. For those, just in case you don't, it's quite simple, quick introductions, which will be quick because there's so many of us now. Just a quick bit then on the purpose of the group and kind of, I think, what the operations group is about. And then the two tasks we've been asked to do, to review the questions and additions, which are sent round with some numbering on them, which hopefully will make it easier when we're all referencing them. And then with that in mind, to then also review that strapline and just to say, what is that operations group strapline representing what we think is important for us? Quick bit about how we deal with meetings in the future, what the frequency is, what's the best format and timing and what have you. And then finally, any other business. So hopefully that's okay. Start with introductions then. I certainly don't know everybody that's on the call. So I think it'd be really helpful if one by one we can just go around, what's your name, what's your organisation, your role within that organisation, and very quickly what you're hoping to bring to the group and get out of the group. We've got quite a few people on, so if we can try and get everyone down to sort of a minute and a half and make it very brief, that would be really, really helpful. I guess let's just start first. I'm Gary Bellinger. I work for A2 Dominion. I'm Assistant Director in Property Services within the organisation, and I've been here for about 5 years, I think, from memory. I'm not a BIM expert at all, but I've been more involved in BIM for the last sort of year in the BIM for HA's group, and as well as the BIM for housing group. And I'm leading in our organisation the charge to try and implement BIM for our new builds. But also my passion is around our existing housing stock and trying to implement BIM and BIM-like principles in our existing stock that wasn't built with BIM. So that's, I guess, what I bring to the group. What I'm hoping to get from the group, ultimately a better buy-in across our sector when it comes to BIM and the implementation of BIM being far more normal and standard. So I'm just going to go from the list that's of candidates. So Alex, can you go next, please, mate?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alex Oldman. I work for Civica. I'm part of the account management team and sales team on the Keystone asset management system. Keystone is used by 140 plus local authorities and housing associations around the UK as their core asset management system. We manage more than half of the UK's housing stock on the platform. I'm a BIM novice, never been involved in a BIM project myself, but I'm a software supplier and I've been involved with the BIM for housing group for over a year. I want to keep a watchful eye on fire safety and building safety acts that are coming through, and the implementation of Hackett into building safety and the implications for digital twins, building information management and models in that. And really what my role is, what I'm interested in doing anyway, is bringing the work of this group to the attention of my customers, who ultimately the end users who are commissioning the buildings, and try and bring other contacts together so that we can network and get better adoption of BIM across the industry.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Ali, can you go next, please?
Hi, my name is Ali Imam. I'm the head of asset management at Origin Housing. I've been here for the last 1 year. Private sector BIM was applied differently over there. And yeah, I've been working for Housing Association for the last couple of years, about 14 years now. I've been a BIM enthusiast. I've studied about BIM. I've led on BIM Level 1 implementation project for statutory compliance at East Thames before it was taken over by L&Q. So yeah, I just want to bring my existing knowledge and experience, which is quite modest, and also to help implement BIM at Origin.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ali. Much appreciated. Can we move to Dave Williams next, please?
Hi there, Dave Williams, Senior Projects Portfolio Manager at Origin Housing. So I'm basically managing the whole Building a Safer Future project for Origin. So keeping an eye on, we've split it into 7 work streams, of which BIM and Ali's involved in that particular one. So it's looking at not only what comes out of this group, but also looking at how it can be applied to our asset management systems, 3D modelling systems, building safety management systems, contractor management, that sort of thing. So it sort of covers the whole gamut, basically. I think that's me. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dave. Much appreciated. Can we go to David Pope now, please?
Hi, morning all. Dave Potes. I'm the technical and cost manager at Notting Hill Genesis in the development side of the business. Same with Gary, really. My experience of BIM is pretty limited. Probably the last year, I've kind of tried to immerse myself in the topic as best I can. I guess from our perspective, the jury's out a little bit on BIM. I think what we're trying to understand is kind of minimum legal requirement that's kind of coming at us in terms of regulation, right through to what the kind of full potential of BIM is. So one of the key things for us is going to be about understanding what the business case is for implementing BIM in full. Hopefully I'll bring a client perspective to the conversations. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's great. Thanks so much, Dave. Luke, can we go for you next, please?
So I'm Luke Hazelwood. I'm Asset Information Manager for Building Services. So from my point of view, I'm in this group because I want to sort of involve myself in what other people are doing with BIM and how it's developing in the industry, because for BIM to work, everyone has to be on board with it. You can't have one group. So that's my involvement there. From my side and what I do, I essentially manage the assets in the operations side of things. So once it's handed over, that's generally where the issues lie, and that's the bit I'm looking to resolve mainly, is maintaining it and maintaining BIM afterwards and looking at existing assets. Yeah.
Sure, Martin next.
That's great. And Luke, you're from L&Q, right?
Yes, I'm from L&Q. I thought did I say it? No, I probably didn't. I'm
Thank you very much, Mark. Are you there, Martin? Showing us there, but I can't hear him. I'm assuming. Oh, Martin, are you there? Right. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Martin, are you there? Have I lost my connection? Hello? Nathaniel, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me? Could someone to feel like my connection?
Yeah, you are breaking up my end.
Yeah, you're breaking up at my end also. I can't tell what's being said at all.
Yeah, and I can hear you clearly. Yeah.
Can anyone hear?
I think Gary's got an issue.
Yeah, I think Gary's dropped off and he's probably trying to reconnect, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I think so. It was a bit laggy. Oh dear! I'll wait for him to come back and then I'll introduce myself, I think.
No, okay.
Hello.
There he is.
There he is.
There he is.
I'm so sorry about this. I knew this was going to be a problem using Teams. There's just something about it that I'm going to struggle with. My computer hates it, or my network and my work network hates it. So I heard as far as Nathaniel.
Yes.
Nathaniel, would you mind just introducing yourself? Martin, we skip.
Yeah, no problem. So Nathaniel Rackham, I'm the BIM manager at Hawkins Brown. George Stevenson at Active Plan introduced me to this group and thought it might be a good idea and I might be able to input. Obviously helped or led the implementation of BIM at Hawkins Brown for the last 5 years, which has meant over that time now we've helped deliver asset information models to both housing sectors, educational sectors. We've also helped one of the large housing builders, L&Q, in developing their BIM strategy and kit of parts, which I can see some overlap there. And hopefully, what can I bring to the group? I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest. Obviously, professional in Revit, I know how to use the software. I know how to manage and strategize projects. And we also obviously educate clients in understanding what it is they want to get from BIM and whether actually they do need it. So it'd be interesting to see what you can get out of my involvement, really. But here to help, basically.
That's great, Nathaniel. Thank you. Paul, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Paul Dixon. I'm head of asset management at Southern Housing Group. I apologise before I start. I've got the electricians in today building an office for me in my house. So they were supposed to be here Friday, so I may drop out at any moment. I've been asked to join this group via Jack Ostrowski, who's on the development team of the group. I look after asset management, as I say, at Southern Housing. And really, I'm very new to BIM. I understand the principles, but I don't really understand the detail. And I would just want to make sure, as an asset manager, that I find a way of getting the right data in the right place into my system for ongoing maintenance in the future.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. Can we go to Richard Whitaker now, please? I don't think Richard Free is here anymore.
Morning. I'm Richard Whitaker, Director of Development of Citizen. We have an ambitious growth programme that was 587 this year, but is now 451 for obvious reasons. But next year it's 600. The year after it's heading up towards 1,000. I've been involved with BIM and BIM housing for a good few years. I was the first social housing client to use BIM on an £11 million scheme. And some of the highlights of that scheme was the standard of the contract documentation that went out. The difference between first and second place tenders was 1.8%. We normally saw 3% on that one. I gave up half the contingency before I came out of the ground. because we were confident in the standard of the information that we'd issued. And on both jobs, of the 5% contingency I had left, I spent 4.69%. So that was either good luck or good management. I'll let you guys decide on that. On the non-BIM scheme, we spent 9.02%. And the 4.69% included an additional unit, the cost of an additional unit, because we'd plotted a tree in the wrong place. So you can still get it wrong with BIM. But that was the only design instruction. Where I am now, we've developed BIM to the point I've got all my planning information, certification, CDM health and safety file sat within the model. So I've got a single data source at Chapter 8. And we've got a pilot going on existing stock with BIM on low-rise units, particularly focusing on fire barriers, which will be no surprise for anybody. And that's in conjunction with Wilmot Dixon. And that's us in a nutshell.
That's great. Thanks, Richard. Sounds like you've got a lot to bring to the group there, and I'm sure you'll be asked a lot of questions as we go. Great to have you here. And I think last but not least, Phil Stacey, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Phil Stacey, Barrett Southern Counties. Work in the technical department and a lot with fire safety. Been involved with BIM 6 or 7 years now. We don't currently use it in our office, but would like to develop a strategy for our division to implement a simple BIM. All of Barrett's house types are in Revit, but we're currently not utilizing them as well as we'd like to. And the main focus that I've been looking at for the last couple of years is standardization of documentation. So building more of a knowledge model that could be connected to graphical information.
That's great. Thank you very much, Phil. Thanks for the
Sorry, you didn't include me. My connection dropped out about 5 minutes ago. I managed to rejoin on my mobile.
Martin, do you want to introduce yourself, mate?
Yeah, so George invited me to participate. I have been working for Kingston Council, Royal Borough of Kingston. I'm actually changing my job in the next few weeks. I'm going to be working for a housing association in Leatherhead, a small housing association called Mount Green. I'm not a BIM practitioner, but I've been involved in management of fire safety, management of asbestos and control of Legionella over the last few years. And it's become very clear that in respect to asset management, the handover information that I've been working with is not sufficient. And I found this at other organisations that I've worked at. Typically the data that has been handed over from development teams not suitable for the operational phase of the buildings. And also there's a general lack of competency, not just with BIM, but also with computer-aided design and asset management. So I'm here to, contribute the issues that I've encountered and learn what I can from others in the group.
That's great. Thank you very much, Martin. Thanks for the intros for everybody. That's really, really helpful. Sounds like we've got quite a variety of skills and levels of sort of knowledge of BIM in the room, which is, I think, is going to be to our benefit. Just a quick note, Ali's just sent an email asking if I can open up the chat box to everyone, which would be helpful in case of connections and what have you. Unfortunately, I can't open it. I can't access it either because I think Richard set the meeting up. So I'm afraid I don't think the chat box is going to work.
I'll open it if somebody can tell me how to do it.
Oh, okay. I don't know, Richard. Sorry, I didn't realise you were still here, Richard.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm keeping quiet and out of the way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know. As has been evidently displayed, I'm not very good with Teams.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it either.
Cool. Okay, let's crack on with the agenda then. So the purpose of the group, I think my understanding of the purpose of the group, and I'm happy for anyone else to sort of jump in, is, I mean, we're part of the UK BIM Alliance. The whole point of the UK BIM Alliance is to increase the uptake of BIM in the UK. The BIM for Housing group obviously specifically looks at the housing sector. Some of you will be aware, and Jack Ostrovsky is a key part of the BIM for Housing Associations group, which I'm also on and have been part of for about the last year and a half. So I think there is a bit of risk here that there's some crossover between those groups, which could be a risk, equally could be a benefit. Ultimately, the purpose of this group is to assist in the take-up of BIM in our sectors, and that's what we're here to do. Does anyone else? That's what we're here to do. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Can I just interrupt? Sorry, I've opened the chat. If you go to the chat on the top left, you can. It should be open.
Yeah, that's working for me. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I still can't access it, but that's probably just me. Okay, in relation to the purpose of the group, does anybody want to add anything to that? I don't know, Richard F, is there anything that you've got to add to that?
Sorry, me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely. As I say, it's, you know, take it stage by stage, step by step. The so-called strap line, whatever you want to call it, get the questions prioritized, and let's get some output from those, and progress from there, really. Okay, that's great, Richard. Thank you. Anybody else, just shout, obviously, if you want to jump in at any point.
The second line is quite long, and it's not really, I think it could be more concise and maybe a bit easier to read. I don't know what the best option would be, maybe to put some bullet points below it. But you know, there's quite a few points packed into one sentence, and I just think it might be, it's not the most readable statement.
No, I would tend to agree with that. Well, what I'd propose that we do is, hopefully everybody's got a copy of the issues raised from the seminar, which sort of show, I think, where people's interests and where their questions are. And if we quickly run through that and perhaps try and agree some initial priorities or areas of interest that we feel as the operations group represents where we are. And then if we use that to maybe amend that strap line. So the strap line represents the areas of priority that I think we'd suggest we take forward. Hopefully everybody's got the numbered version, because it was just in bullet points before, which doesn't make it the easiest of things to do over Teams. I went through and I highlighted, just from my opinion, what are the things I thought were useful for operations. If I just shout the numbers out that I've got down sort of first as a starting point, because there's a lot of people on the call, it might become a bit chaotic otherwise. So I've sort of gone through and picked out items 7, 8, 9, 12, 15, 17, 18, 19, 35, 36, 41, and 51. Sorry, I appreciate this probably is like the worst game of bingo ever. Sarah from Enfield, who's not able to be at the meeting today, she's kindly sent through an additional item, which was around capturing the change during occupation in the BIM model and linking that through to the controls around those changes, which I think is very relevant. So if we call that one item 57 for the time being. Can I ask, and I think I'm just going to have to run from the top again, if that's okay. If anybody has anything that they would like to add or disagrees with the ones that I've sort of just shouted out as the priorities, and to sort of make any statement on that. So Martin, you're now at the top of the list for me. Could you just say if you've got anything to add to that?
Something that's been on my mind is in regard to retrospective BIM. So say you've got tower blocks built in the 1950s. You don't have as-built drawings, as is the case with Kingston. So, you know, defining what the tolerances should be when scanning the building and producing the drawings, that can make a significant difference in the cost of that exercise. Now, if the use of the drawings is just for managing health and safety compliance, it doesn't have to have the same degree of tolerance as, say, for a development. You know, we're not rebuilding the block. What we need to do is we need to know what's there, what the type of construction is, but it doesn't have to be millimeter accuracy. And when I've gone out, you know, to get quotes for 3D scanning of buildings, the expectation is that the level of accuracy has to be, you know, to engineering standards. I don't think that is necessary myself. I think it puts an undue burden on organisations having to adopt BIM with their existing stock. You know, we have to ask the question, what is it going to be used for? We're not going to be rebuilding the building. We just want to have an outline of what's there, and to be able to label the different assets, the structural elements, the fire doors, you know, all the compartmentation, etc. You know, you don't have to draw it to a millimeter accuracy to do that, but that seems to be the standard expectation of BIM. So that's the issue that I have.
Yeah, Martin, I mean, I think you're right. Certainly talking to a number of people who've been exploring point cloud scans and where we go from that. Accuracy and that sort of engineering level seems to be like almost like a base point. I think you're right. It's about what you need to use that data for. I don't think most of us would want to go and cut a piece of carpet off site and then expect it just to fit in. I think it is more about the bigger ticket items. So, you know, what is the structure of the building? What is the cladding system? Where is the fire stopping? That side of things. Okay, so I think that's a really good point. We've got the retrospective element covered in item 12, but I think particularly that bit about tolerance and the purpose of what you're going to use it for affecting the type of data that you collect is one that I've captured. So thank you for that, Martin. Can I go to Luke? You're now at the top of the list.
Okay, so from L&Q's point of view for the operation side, we're not actually looking at that level of tolerance for existing buildings. We did look at 3D scanning, but the costs of us doing 3D scans, laser scans of a building is just excessive. We can't. There isn't a company in the world at the moment that could afford to do it for 130,000 units. Yeah. Well, for what you'd get out of it. So what I'm more interested in is the actual data behind it. So I don't necessarily need a drawing to say this is the layout of a building. I just need to know what's actually in the building. So is there a fire alarm, and how many smoke detectors are there, and where are they located, and what's their expected life, and all this sort of information. But having it in standard format, rather than someone going, oh yeah, the fire alarm's in the hallway and there's detector in that cupboard over there and there's a riser cupboard there, but having all of that standardized. And then some of the things we were looking at that might actually be worth doing is 3D photography and then attaching data to the photograph itself. So being able to have a 3D photo of a plant room, for example, the amount of value we can get out of that if we can attach a link to say, here's the link to the asset in our asset management system for the boiler, and here's it for the pump, and here's it for the water tanks or whatever it is. But that's what we're looking at doing, and that's what I think the value is. I don't think that there is much value in doing engineering level drawings for everything.
Thanks, Luke. That's really helpful. So essentially, that the data behind, what people often call BIM, which is a 3D model, it's the data that you're more interested in. And again, I think there's an interesting point there that when particularly BIM people who aren't BIM experts, which I put myself in that category, when I first started looking at this and learning about BIM, the assumption that BIM is a model, or BIM is just, has to exist within a Revit model that's of engineering quality, was certainly my view. But the more I've learned about it, I think you're absolutely right. The data that's held behind it, how that's being held, how it's being used and updated is, I think, for where, as asset managers, where the magic of BIM could be. I think it's less about a model and more about the data. The 3D photography thing is interesting too. Matterport is a very popular 3D photography system that's used for, in the estate agency and what have you. But there's a lot of examples of where that's now being used to tag components as sort of a surrogate for a 3D model. So it sounds like that could be interesting for us to look at too. Thanks for that, Luke. Can we go to Alex?
Yeah, I'm just unmute myself. Okay, so I think you've called out most of those items that I've identified. The Hackett ones are the ones I'm interested in principally. 51, how will BIM add value post handover, I think is very important in terms of building the business case. And I think we could do a paper on that, a briefing basically, to expand upon, for example, Richard's experiences and any other experiences, to try and explain to executives exactly what the value is in the investment that they'll need to take into BIM. We could take definitely a retro BIM spin on that. I see all of that coming together. I'm just thinking about what the outputs from this group could be. So the discussion for quite a high level audience on what the benefits are in order to get that engagement, which I think we're missing at the moment. I'm interested in understanding what level of detail people are going to in terms of the information they're collecting and how that information is being transferred around. Now, I know that that's something that's tackled with BIM and COBie, and I don't want to overlap with work that I understand BIM for Housing Associations is doing in terms of standards for information exchanges. So I think we might have to wait on some of the activities we can do until BIM for Housing Associations have published their stuff and see if there's anything that we can complement on that. But yeah, Hackett and Retro BIM are two big areas that I'd like to put discussion papers forward on.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Does seem to be an early theme around existing buildings, which is perhaps predictable because of who's in the room, a lot of asset managers as well as development people, obviously. The Hackett and fire safety one's quite interesting because I think a lot of people are beginning to look at BIM as a solution to Hackett and fire safety and safety cases and what have you, which I think is very valid. I think it'll be interesting as we go through and listen to other people as to how many people are looking at that as their sort of sole deliverable within their organisations, and how many people are looking at that as one of a number of deliverables that could come from BIM. So that'll be quite an interesting one, I think, as we go forward. So thanks, Alex. Ali, can you go next, please, mate?
Sorry, Gary, I did have the agenda for this meeting, so kind of crashing your party here.
That's okay. Anyone at the party is welcome. So, I mean, from your perspective, what are the key things? I appreciate if you've not seen the issues raised, that's fine. Well, what are the key things that you'd like the group then to sort of look at? From your business perspective, is it around, making sort of BIM easier to adopt? Is it, the scanning solutions that you're interested in? Is it particularly around fire safety? Well, what are the key things that you're looking for?
Okay, so I'm also part of the other, as you know, the other BIM for Main housing group, and where we're thinking about developing the asset information requirements, AIRs, in line with the 1192-93 standard. So that is, we've already kind of started on 2 buildings now, scanning 2 buildings. And think this is something that I need to develop pretty quickly for our organization. So I wanted to see what we're discussing here in terms of creating like a global standard for those AIRs, and how can we make some adjustments to do it as for every organization individually. I'll be looking into some of the technologies that you mentioned, like Matterport, and there is some other like 360 degrees item tagging video cameras, Leica, a few others that allow you to do that. There are some who charge you for hosting, some that don't. And again, I mean, it is up to us really, according to the 1192 standards, what the organizational requirements are. So it's interesting to see what L&Q is doing, and they've decided not to go for the full 3D models and use interactive information instead.
That's great. Thanks, Ali. That's really helpful. I mean, I think the standards piece is an interesting one. I think on the other group, somebody came up with sort of the quote that standards are a bit like toothbrushes. Everybody wants them, but everybody wants to use their own. And I think that's something that's seen quite a lot in BIM when it comes to the different information standards. We've got HACT coming up currently with some information standards that look quite interesting that the BIM for HA group is looking at, as well as more established sort of construction standards like things like Uniclass, which generally don't seem to be used very much in housing associations.
Yeah, and again,
just point out the L&Q are looking to both use HACT. We're very heavily invested in that, and also I'm trying to pull in Uniclass as well, and I've been trying to do that for a while in our team.
Yeah, that could be one of the reasons. Could be, look, I think it was because of Rob Ray. He was used to work for Rob, and I used to work together at East Thames before it became L&Q. So Rob, I think he stayed in touch and continued working on some of those projects that were participated by L&Q. So I think Dave and I are working here towards developing our standards for Origin now. So yeah, it's been very helpful to be on such group and discuss all these ideas and see what we're thinking in terms of having like a global requirement template.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Ali. Dave W., is there anything you want to add sort of from Origin's perspective, or has Ali covered it?
Yeah, I think sort of Ali's sort of covered it. I mean, from my perspective, it's more about the commonality of standards in order for systems to talk to each other, because we can see where we're going to have some sort of asset management system, a building safety management system to manage, sort of what jobs, happen on these buildings post safety case, that whole management of the golden thread going forward, and it's how those systems are going to talk to each other. Similarly with health and safety systems, where we're running fire risk assessments, so how fire risk assessments can map asset attributes and components, into asset management systems, into building safety management systems, into 3D modeling systems. So it's all of that stuff, including stuff like, whether there's a valid use for things like using QR codes. I know, for instance, from a health and safety perspective, the software we use for that is used at Liverpool Football Club, where they can walk along, scan a barcode on a component, and automatically be told when that component's due for servicing, etc., where and that can map to a model. So it's that whole making sure that whatever standards we adopt are universal, or at least other vendors are aware of them and can accommodate them. Yeah, I guess that's probably my side of things.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Dave P.
Yeah, I've not looked at the list, I have to be honest, from an operational standpoint, because the focus for me has been largely about the new development. But sure. I mean, what's quite interesting in the conversations that we've already had is there clearly isn't a one size fits all to this solution. And whilst we're looking to standardize wherever we can, I think clients are still exploring just what solution works best for them. And it's interesting that you mentioned the new fire safety regulation. I don't think there's any doubt, certainly for us, that is the principal driver for what is getting us to kind of consider this topic. And will be at the heart of any business case that we put together. But I guess the bigger ticket item here is so what else? There's clearly a huge amount of value And I think Richard's, already talked about the impact that BIM has had on his development costs. And I think there's a huge opportunity here that remains a bit unexplored. And I think part of the role of this group, I think, is just to share, those ranges of experience, just to stimulate, those conversations within organisations to really understand what is it we need to get out of this. And I think from a development point of view, being a little bit simplistic, is actually, I think the development challenge is fairly straightforward. BIM has been present in the development world for a considerable amount of time, and I think, whilst it maybe hasn't been implemented universally, the environment is fairly well advanced in its capability around this stuff. I think the big challenge is around helping asset teams define what is it you need. What do you need to run your business effectively? In development, it's then easy. We simply instruct that, and so long as we can afford it, then we can get on with it. So yeah, I mean that's my perspective on it, but it's very much from a kind of development stance rather than an operational one.
Thanks, Dave. I mean, I kind of agree about the, in theory, BIM for development is simple because it's following an established route. People are building with BIM all the time, and why can't housing associations? I think part of the problem has been getting traction within our sector around how benefits are being sold. Benefits for BIM are often sold on the basis of things like clash detection and an X% saving in cost and what have you, and efficiency. My experience is that if you sell the benefits in a different way, is you're more likely to have the ear of chief execs and boards. And when we're looking at building quality, when you're looking at how much has been spent on latent defects by organisations because things weren't quite built as people thought, and in particularly now when you're looking at the safety case and when you're looking at asset management, saving money and spending money effectively over the life of the building will make 5% of the build cost pale into insignificance.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I know I've spent a lot of time talking to Johnny Furlong at L&Q. Yeah, and I know they've done a lot of thinking around the kind of business case that they've put together. And if you just focus on the cost of producing safety cases in the future, the benefits of BIM, become very clear very, very quickly. Interestingly enough as well, in the early days when I spoke to Johnny, a lot of their business case was also about customer service. It was about the better information that you've got, the quicker and more accurately you can respond to customers' concerns and customers' queries. And I think that's a huge, part of the benefit of just having much better quality data.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, that can be very compelling. Luke, we've done. So Nathaniel, can you jump in with sort of your key priorities, either on the list or off the list?
So I guess much like Ali, I've not actually seen the list that's been devised so far. So I think, given how everyone's contributed so far, I think it would be great if we could have something to assist clients in educating, because obviously what's quite clear, because this is the first time I've met you guys and been involved in this, is that it's quite clear that there is a massive disparity in understanding of what BIM is and what it can actually do for clients and how they can actually leverage it. And I think it would be really good to get something in place where a really simple, plain language, this is what it is. This is how it can affect your business. This is the advantages that it brings. But ultimately, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to decide before you go down this path. The number of clients we have where they say they want full BIM level 2, but they don't provide us with an asset information requirements document at the beginning. And you don't get it until the main contractor comes on board, by which point they've lost a lot of the advantages, many advantages which they didn't even know about. They could have used that data in the earlier stages. So it'd be good as a way of, I'd like to get something in place where we can help clients identify what it is they need. So then that can then steer them down the path that's best suited to them. And that might be, okay, do they go and get a point cloud survey? Do they actually need a 3D model, or do they just need asset information? I think David touched on, the development side of things. Yes, all the new build stuff, pretty much is being done correctly now. We're getting a lot of clients through. All the models are done in 3D. Asset information models are provided. Main contractors, supply chains are building upon that. And one hopes, in theory, that the CAFM systems that are being used at the end are utilising this data. I think Uniclass, obviously, people that aren't using COBie and Uniclass, I don't know what it is they're using and why they would want to use something else. That is the standard. They are there. IFC, obviously, 2x3 is there as well to support that. So yeah, I think just educating clients. I think making sure that people understand what ultimately BIM is and how they can actually use it and the benefits, and helping them choose the right path, I think.
Thanks, Nathaniel. That links quite interestingly to the work that the BIM for HA's group is doing, which Ali will certainly know. One of the key deliverables for that group is to create a case, I guess, for boards, for chief execs, which is covering off some of the things that we've already discussed. But it's also to provide some sort of guide and some standardization of documents as almost like a BIM starter kit, so that some of the heavy lifting is done, so organisations aren't having to start with a blank piece of paper without quite recognising what it is they need to have at the point that they're procuring or at the point that they're designing their solutions. So there'll be some interesting crossover, I think, with the BIM for HA's group and the deliverables that come out of that group.
If I could just interrupt there, if you don't mind. We are actually having some quite high-level conversations with BIM for HA, and we're going to be, I think, working with them moving forward, not to speak presumptuously, quite closely on a lot of this stuff, partially as a funnel, and partially a lot of the, I mean, as I said, George is really looking forward to getting something at the end of this, getting, like you just said, Gary, yourself, sort of how-to guides to do things that people can come here and they get that information. Obviously, some of this stuff takes, some of these issues are things that take months, not a couple of meetings on Teams. Well, that's obviously way beyond our remit here, but that's the kind of thing that we perhaps push over. Whereas some of the smaller scale stuff that's no less important, we can actually focus on within our groups.
That's really helpful, Richard. I mean, there's certainly going to be crossover between these groups, and where we can avoid duplication and instead maximise the benefit of the work done by the groups, that's probably the sweet spot if we can find it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're not in competition, for goodness sake. We're working together, aren't we?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. So, Paul, can I just get your view on the priorities, please?
So, very much listening to what people have said around the room, I would echo a lot of that. Again, being in the recipient end of this data, in the asset management side, the fire safety cases, the data behind the models rather than 3D modelling, and standardization of definitions are real key things for me.
Thanks, Paul. That's great. Yeah, so it's beginning to echo what some of the guys have already said, which when you come to the end of the list, I guess that's likely. Thank you. Richard W., please.
Yeah, no, I think my commentary will be BIM doesn't manage quality. So only managing quality manages quality and sorts defects out, whether it's paper drawing, BIM or whatever. I think the sell for me has to come from the asset management end of this and the promotion that it's building information management and it's not just a model. That's, it's come unstuck because of that. And I think in terms of that, when people get that, it supports asset management and future work and, your 30-year business plan and all that sort of thing, and the accuracy of the information that you get from a single data source really is something that people should appreciate and get. Then you put your health and safety thing on it, and you've got something that stops chief execs going to jail for fire barrier issues and that sort of thing. The other one is kill the acronyms. There are too many acronyms. Switch off immediately. And I can't remember them all, but there's a BIM execution plan, there's a CIPX, there's a, I don't know, whatever they are. Yeah, they're all nonsense. And we had a pre-start program. Pre-BIM, we had a pre-start program. We put milestones in his pre-start program. That was it. It got rid of all them acronyms. And we had 4 levels of information. So BIM data drop 1, 2, 3, and 4 at various stages as you come up to go out to tender. Do you know what? It was dead easy just to get people to focus on it. It was just 4 milestones that said, right, look at this at this point to keep it all flowing together. So it's the practicality and the flexibility needed from just health and safety to a full asset management tool that we need to recognise. That's it for me.
Thanks, Richard. That's really insightful. I think the point about acronyms is really, really well made. Because I'm not a BIM expert, I didn't really know a lot about BIM. I took it upon myself to do an online BIM training course, I don't know, about 6 months ago. And some of the flow charts and diagrams with all the acronyms in and the arrows going in 27 different directions, you can see why people have struggled with BIM, and particularly asset managers who generally are quite practical people who understand buildings, who understand process, who aren't daft people at all. But I looked at that and I was just like, Christ, what have I got myself into here? When you take the time to go through it, you know, a lot of it does make a lot of sense, but it can be a real barrier to people accepting BIM and to asset managers accepting BIM. Other conversations I've had with people are, it's interesting where you either get a development push at BIM or you get an asset management push at BIM, but seldom do you get both together. And it tends to be one is pulling the other or one is pushing the other. The point that you've made about asset managers sort of having that benefit sold to them, so that and promoting that benefit, I think is also really important and something that we should be considering.
There's a potential
one of the things for us is we've got asset management teams who would come back to us on jobs that were 5 and 6 years old, saying, "Oh, can you tell me about this information?" Because the existing system was so disparate, they couldn't find a thing. And which file is it in and that sort of thing. So that's a single data source. And one of the things that really helped us was we turned around and said, "No, we can't tell you. It's in your filing structure." And when they realised they hadn't got an easy route because their system were broke, all of a sudden we're sat around the table saying, "How do we fix all this?" And that's what got the asset bit going. So sometimes tough love's needed as well.
Can I just chip in there for a second, Gary? What I see is critical, and George is the only person really who's been able to define this in terms that I can understand, George Stevenson, is how critical AIRs are. And it's one of those acronyms. So the Asset Information Requirements. If you don't, at the start of the project, define right down to the granular detail of each element what information you require, then when you come to populate the asset management software system, you're not going to have that. So it's really, really important at the start of the project to get maintenance teams, asset management teams involved in defining to, you know, a very fine detail, the AIRs. Now, it is a painful exercise, and, you know, people don't want to be involved in this level of complexity. But if they're not defined, you won't be able to populate the asset management system. And I think that the trick is, as again, George has identified, is having a system which can identify what's required and do the quality assurance so that when handover information is put into the system, if that detail's not there, it will flag it up and send it back to the contractor and say, you haven't provided this information or you've provided it in the wrong format. To depend on individuals to manage thousands of lines on spreadsheets, it is beyond human capability. It has to be automated. But without defining it in the AIRs, you're never going to get that automation.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Martin. And the AIRs is something that the BIM for HAs group, it's one of the deliverables, if you like, a standard starter set of AIRs where they follow you know, an appropriate architecture within there that's sort of COVID compliant, that can then be tested against, like, the pieces of software that George has that make sure that what you're getting is what you think you're getting. An interesting point that's been recognised by the BIM for HAs group, though, and this is something that probably Alex can chip in on, is that people are driven by what their systems, their CAFM systems can handle, and how, you know, things like, you know, estates, blocks, stairwells, units, shared space are defined. Just varies tremendously from organisation to organisation and system to system. And even people with the same system will have different architecture set up now that is virtually impossible to change. So there is a recognition that with a standard, well-defined set of AARs, there still needs to be some flexibility or tailoring within that document so that it can actually work in a CAFM system that the organisation has.
Yeah, I think just to chip in on that, actually, one of our clients did specify asset information, and then we realised that their CAFM system can't actually read COBie. So then you then went on to the conversation. Well, what long term? What are you going to do? You can't continue to manage the buildings the way you are currently, because you've realised clearly that it's inefficient. So then you have to invest then and change the system, and then go around and reassess all the properties that they own. But that was something that they decided they had to do. So it's a tricky one.
I was going to say, just to echo that, I mean, one of the things that I'm currently working on at our organisation is when our housing system was put in, everything was done at a 2-level asset hierarchy. So my job at the moment is to work out the best way of changing that and bringing it into a 5-tier hierarchy in order to map specific components at the right level. Whereas, you know, in some buildings it's quite easy, in some of our complex buildings this is going to be a significant challenge. So in fact, I was thinking of tapping up a few people here just to ask them how they do it separately outside of this meeting. But yeah, it is going to be a big old challenge.
Yeah, just on that, Dave, we're doing the same thing in our business. We're migrating to a new IT system over a period of 3 or 4 years. And we're currently moving from a 3-tier hierarchy to a 5-tier hierarchy, and then trying to peg all of our components and assets within that. So I'd certainly be happy to have a conversation about that outside. And I think if anyone else wants to be part of that, we can have a virtual coffee or something over it.
Yeah, I think it defines what your assets actually are. And interestingly, we did a head scratch about 6 months ago when we started looking at this problem. So we're a software supplier, as I've already mentioned. We came to the rather startling conclusion that if you're trying to adapt COBie, then our existing data model and the system we have, the legacy system we have, isn't going to meet that requirement. So what we're building at the moment is a mapping, and to allow us to transfer COBie data. Talking about 3 or 5-tier or 7-tier architecture, I think it depends on how far you go down to define exactly what an asset is. Is an asset, at its most fundamental level, you could have a piece of equipment in a property, and do you define that as an asset? Well, you should and could. So I think there are 2 other software suppliers that I would like to bring into this discussion as we continue, because there are 2 other providers who are potentially, as an industry, as an IT suppliers, we can provide some input, and I've got to push for that inside my business and with my customers. So we're well aware of that issue. So I'd say if you're looking at a legacy system, you should be talking to your suppliers to say, right, you guys have got to engage with the technology and the standards that we've got and move forward. That's what I'm trying to push on my side of the business in what we're doing.
Thanks for that, Alex. That is really helpful to get the IT sort of suppliers' take on this, and I think it'd be valuable to keep that going throughout. Just to close the loops, Phil, can we just get your sort of priorities? I think then we've done everyone.
Yeah, I think the challenge for us at this point is we get a lot of queries from legacy sites, and it'd be good to understand how, you know, housing associations or property management companies are absorbing that data and information, so that there could be some reconciliation at some point, probably on a very simple level, because as everybody knows, lots of requests are coming around fire safety at the moment, and how I could feed that back into the business and say, you know, these are some of the major players that are using this standard, and potentially there could be some adoption, really, because at this point we're not really engaged in utilizing BIM, but I think there's some really good opportunities for us to use a good standard, but it has to be on a very simple level for us to engage in. And that's been the big challenge for us, is even at a divisional level, how do we engage with a lot of our consultants now are using Revit or other 3D modelers, but it's how we engage with them on a simple level, and understanding how that potential, not necessarily a graphical model, but some kind of data model could be handed over as part of the health and safety file. But it's a very simple, so that it could potentially be rolled out. So yeah, I guess that's the challenge for us, is that it's been sold, BIM has been sold since 2011 as lots of complexity, but at the end of the day, our division builds mostly houses and low-rise, so we're not using complex models. So yeah, but around the Hackett and fire safety would be very good.
That's great. Thanks for that, Phil. Just with one eye on the clock, obviously my ambition to do this in an hour was wildly unachievable, but we will make sure we do it by 12 when the meeting was set. Just having scribbled some notes as we've been going along, it feels like, if you like, bringing all of everybody's comments together, the priorities are around things like data and standards, including sort of scanning in that. So around a discussion or say a piece around that. Fire safety, unsurprisingly, jumps off the page. I think systems in use, so what IT systems, CAPM systems, how do we keep them updated? How do they talk to each other? There's certainly a piece around that. The case for BIM, so savings, benefits in the life cycle, generally undersold, and also then thinking, so what will we use BIM for? And that will be different for different organisations. But the case bit is around maybe organisations building a case around whatever their priorities are. And then the last thing that I wrote down was easy adoption. So making it easy for organisations, client organisations like ours, to get into BIM and to begin to make BIM part of their standard working practices. How do people feel about that? Does that sound okay as some initial bullet points? So we've kind of condensed the initial list and the other things down into sort of 5 or 6. If people are happy with that, what I'll try and do is I'll go off, obviously after the meeting, go offline and just try and get those consolidated down into a single page or something. But is anyone sort of allergic to that? Does anyone feel that we've got any massive gaps there? It doesn't.
I was going to say, the only gap I can think of, which I think is sort of being echoed, but implicitly rather than explicitly, is the differences between what happens with new builds and what happens with retrospective, retrospective BIM or retrospective modelling, etc. Because although it could be that the standard of information or the level of information that's captured ends up being the same, I know from our organisation's perspective, we're looking at a smaller set of data to capture for retrospective because of the complications of having residents in situ and all that sort of thing, compared to perhaps a larger set of data that we would capture for new builds and developments, because we don't have those restrictions about having residents in place. That's the only thing I don't know what everyone else's consensus is on that point.
Yeah, I think the case for existing buildings is absolutely right. And I agree. Some people within the BIM industry believe, and are probably right, that you can make a full sort of BIM model, as it were, exactly the same as if you built the thing brand new. Now, whilst that might be physically possible, I just don't think it's needed. And I forget who it was. I mean, Luke, who said that, you know, scanning all of their buildings just isn't, that the cost doesn't reflect the benefit. So I think having a lighter version of BIM for existing buildings, which is how kind of we're approaching it in our organisation, which will be built off the same architecture in the same sort of format and will handle the data in the same way, we'll just have of it. It is something probably we could build into this as a priority if people agree.
Can I just interrupt there a minute? Be a bit careful that you don't, when you're kind of lumping things together in 5 or 6 themes, that we don't end up being with output that's just a general discussion on a theme that's got no granularity and doesn't actually solve any specific issues. The idea of having all those questions were that they weren't lumped together in a theme to be all put together. It was because they're individual issues that have been raised by people in the industry, a number of people in the industry over a number of events, and to actually answer them. Yeah, there's an actual output there, and this is, so somebody who has this problem, this is what they can do. This is what they need to do, and experts have said this is the way around it. Now, some of those things, there could be somebody on this call that could answer some of those questions right now. Some of them, it could take a bit of research, it could take a bit of discussion, it could involve discussion with members of other teams. But what I'm saying is don't go too general, because we want to be very granular as much as we can. It's not going to take ages. Some of them can be, some of these little steps can be very small and can be done very quickly. But do you understand what I mean? Let's keep some specificity in it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that, Richard. I think part of why I've tried to bring some of these together is that the answers in some respects will cross over. But no, absolute point taken. I'm happy to go away and maybe work at a slightly more granular level with it, and use this to prioritise.
Sure, I mean, as like group headings or something, just as I say, you get my drift anyway.
That's great.
I agree with Richard's point. In respect to asset management, the devil really is in the detail. And if you don't provide the detail, it's not really of the best, of most use. Something that applies to retrospective BIM that doesn't apply to any other area of BIM is management of asbestos. Because obviously for development, that's not an issue. Now, for management of asbestos, defining the locations is key, and the different tiers of locations and how they're defined with an asbestos register is key. That doesn't exist in Uniclass. I know that. I've spoken to MBS, and I've said the criteria I need to define asbestos locations is not present in your classification systems. So, there are some unique things that will apply to retrospective BIM, and asbestos is one of those. So it's very easy just to focus on fire safety, respective compliance. Don't forget other areas such as control of Legionella and asbestos and fire safety systems, and where locations are defined in a system, those classifications have to apply across all areas of compliance, not just fire safety.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Martin. Thank you for that.
Gareth, Dave probably just wanted to add a couple of things, and I see Richard's raised his hand as well, so I think Richard wants to say some stuff. But I mean, I absolutely agree that we need to kind of get this into the detail, and we've got the same issue with the development group, in the sense that we've already identified what the key topics are, but I think the next step is to then take specific questions and apply them to those topics. I think one of the challenges, the list that's been put together, I found it actually wasn't in all instances very specific in terms of the question that it was asking. It was raising general questions rather than specific questions. But certainly for the development group, the next plan I've got is to actually try and translate that into specific issues.
Sure. Sorry.
The other thing I was going to say is, and we didn't talk about this in the development group either, and I wonder if it's more of an issue for the asset side of life, is the whole issue around capability and competence. I mean, being a bit cynical about it, within the development world, and we're going to outsource most of this stuff anyway, we buy it in. Whereas in the world of operations, you're going to have people that are going to have to, work with this and develop this. So I wonder if there is another, and it might be implied in the topics that you've agreed, but I wonder if we need to explicitly recognise that, part of the challenge for most clients is going to be about developing capability around this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think it is a gap actually. And you're right, specifically around the asset management piece, because the implementation of BIM for asset managers is very different than for the development guys, without doubt.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, Richard W, you have got your hand raised. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I just wanted to support the views on asbestos management and Legionella and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What it can be done, you can put a simple link in the filing structure side of the model. You don't have to build it within the entity side of it. So it can link to an existing asset management, asbestos register. So whoever's responsible for the asbestos register continues that, and your BIM is just a vehicle to get to that document. So it's a single data source without creating a mountain of Word.
Can I just say, obviously, if you've got a question that you think is too general, hey, split it down. Split it down. It's why not? Why not? Then we've got like 4 smaller answers to one larger question. It's the same difference. It's a lot more manageable and a lot more relatable to anybody coming on board onto the site for some information.
Okay. That's really good. Thanks for that. What I'll do then is I'll take this away. I won't roll it up quite like I suggested, but what I'll do is I'll come up with an amended document that has, in some cases, slightly more granular questions, but the priorities that we think will, if we can answer those or get answers to them, will make a difference to us as a team of operations people. So I'll go away and do that. I guess then the point is in future meetings, we will need to start chomping into those and working out what does the question, how does the question need to be answered? Is it a piece of written work? Is it some research? What does it look like? And start sort of chomping into them that way. Richard F, is that sort of the way that other groups have been?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, George put up on, well, I don't think it was George, but somebody's put up on each of the group, each group page on the team site. It's a 3-stager basically. What's the question? What are the implications? What can we do about it? That's the thought process.
Okay.
I'm assuming the workstream leads are talking to each other anyway to make sure that they're not doubling up on the
right at the moment. Well, that's actually why I'm here, Dave. To kind of like, this is the theory, to kind of like sit in the background. But once you've got once you've had a meeting, 2 meetings, where somebody says, oh, actually, we probably need to speak to so and so, or I'll pick up on that maybe 2 people from there should move into 2 people to work with a couple of people from somewhere else, and the process is defining itself as we're moving forward, and at the moment we're still at first meeting stage, and obviously for a couple of groups we haven't had first meetings yet, but yeah, absolutely, definitely. There's going to be a lot of crossover, and I think that's when it's going to get more interesting.
Okay. Just with one eye on the clock, can we just move on to the strap line? Richard, can you just confirm? So, what's the? Don't take this the wrong way, but what's the point of the strap line?
Do you know what? I have no idea. I have no idea. I wouldn't call it a strap line. It's not a strap line. A strap line is 3 words you have under a logo. This is it's not even a mission statement, is it? It's just something about the group. So it's very much, I mean, George wrote them all. It was just something to put on the site about the group. excuse me, we put up a putative site just so that there was something there really that we can gradually build on as we go along and make it an informational hub, as I've said before. So really, it's just something about your group. What do you want to say about your group? It's in relation to BIM, what you want to do, what you want to get out of this, issues. We're not talking. It's not an epistle. It's a few lines. That's all really. George put something up there, so there was something there. If it steers you in a direction, that's great. If it doesn't, you want to do something else, do something else.
Okay, thanks, Rich. That's really helpful. I mean, I think having read this, there's nothing in there that I think is wrong. I'm just not sure it's telling us what we're here for or what we're doing necessarily.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. There's no preciousness about that text. Believe me. If I'd written it, there would have been, but I didn't.
Fair play. Can I make a suggestion? And please jump in. That once we've done a bit of work just refining our priorities, which I'll do, could somebody have a go at just redoing this strapline or why we here sort of piece, reflecting those priorities? Would somebody mind volunteering for that? Sorry, apologies, my phone's ringing in the background.
Yeah, I put my hand up for that.
Excellent.
I'll just add to that comment. I know that a couple of people haven't managed to get in today to the meeting. Thomas and Paul Soren were both having problems on Teams. That said, I think we need to stick to Teams. Let's work around this. I don't want to get drawn onto other platforms, but we can work collaboratively on one platform. But I want to find ways to work with other people. But let's not get split off.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. As I've said, I'm recording this so that anybody who's missed it, they can catch up, fast forward it or whatever, and catch up on anything they've missed. But I don't think we can do much more than that. We don't want to be writing out minutes and all this kind of stuff. If it's up there to be seen, and I don't know. I mean, David, you did a nice little précis of the meeting, which I know you sent over to us. I assume you did that. You sent that to your people as well. Is that what you're planning on doing, Gary? Just a little summation or something?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I've been scribbling frantically as we've been going along.
Yeah, well, if somebody's missed the meeting or they couldn't get on or they missed half of it, that covers it. As long as they're in a position to come on to the next meeting and not have to spend half that meeting somebody catching them up, because that's just a waste of time, really, isn't it?
Okay, so it sounds like we've got agreement so I'm going to go away and do the prioritization based on the work. Then we'll have an initial kick around of that document very quickly, which then Alex, you can use to have a go at a new strapline. So that sounds like we've got some early deliverables just from this meeting, which is great. Should we just quickly bounce on to then future meetings? Sort of frequency. I appreciate everyone's super busy, and an hour meeting out of the diary is is quite a valuable resource. But we do want to, I guess, get some momentum or keep the momentum going. Are we okay to sort of meet every, I don't know, initially 3 or 4 weeks?
Yeah, happy. I'm fine with that.
Sounds good.
Can I just say something on that, just for a change? You've got a big team and they're engaged. So once you get into a situation where you've got questions that you're going to prioritise, split them up. You haven't all got to be working on everything.
Yeah, I think we have got an opportunity to separate sort of things out. I think, we'll talk about sort of platforms and stuff in a sec, but Microsoft Teams is a very good collaborative platform to work outside of a meeting too. And I think the more that we can sort of sweat that ability, the more we'll get out of it for the least effort. It is quite difficult meeting this sort of scale of new people with this sort of setup. So if we can do some work offline and then keep the meetings down to sort of decisions and summaries, I think we'll probably get more out of the meeting time.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like everyone's in principle agreeing with sort of 3 or 4 weekly meetings. So Alex has expressed a preference for Zoom. Sorry, not for Zoom, for Teams. I totally get that George and Richard want us to keep it on Teams, and that makes perfect sense. despite a bit of a issue at my end initially, it seems to have worked fine since then. So I'm going to assume that everyone can live with Teams carrying forward. Yeah, excellent. That's great.
Yeah, Teams is really good for sharing documents and working collaboratively on documents as well. So.
Yeah, once you get going, I think that's when it's going to come into its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Teams offline is brilliant. I'm a member in several sort of Teams meeting groups that do work offline. I think as a collaborative thing, it's perfect. I just seem to have some trouble with the video, but hey ho. That's great. So let's quickly run around for any other business. So starting at the top of my list, Alex, anything else from you, mate?
No, nothing here. Thank you.
Okay, Martin.
No, thanks.
Ali.
At this stage, thank you.
Thanks, Dave W.
Yeah, I've got a couple of documents which I'll stick in Teams that may be of interest to people. It's our EIRs that we're using for our model safety cases, our two first stabs at this. So I'll put that in there. And also, if anyone's interested, I'll put a PDF copy of our project plan for the Building a Safer Future programme in case people are interested in that as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that sounds great, Dave. I think a lot of people would be really interested to see that. Thank you. Dave.
Thanks, Dave. I was planning to share that with Gary and Ethan.
Sorry, say that again.
I was just saying, I was planning to share this with you, Gary, for our upcoming meeting, but thank you, Dave, for sharing that on the thread.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Dave P.
Yeah, actually, Dave made me think. We're pretty close to some outputs from the for HA group in terms of standard toolkits, EIRs, AIRs, and the such like, and they're just about to go through a kind of final peer review. I wondered if there would be some value in, once that's done, of actually uploading those documents into this Teams site, so they can have sight of what's coming out of that and understand what's being produced by that group.
Yeah, 100%. I think once those documents are through the final stage of peer review and they're in a shareable format, I think there's a lot of the conversation today that will be informed by that.
Yeah. Just one last thing. Well done, mate. Good first meeting. They're kind of tough to organise, aren't they?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Yeah, I've got a bit of a sweat on at this end, I've got to be honest. Luke.
No, nothing from me. Nothing else from me.
Great. Nathaniel.
Just unmute myself. No, nothing from me.
Cool. Thank you. Paul.
No, that's great. Thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you. Richard F.
Just a quick one. Anybody who hasn't sent me photos and a 5-line bio, if they would do that, I know most of you have, but anybody who hasn't, if you would send it through, that'd be great.
Thanks, Richard. Richard W.
Yeah, there's none for me. Thank you all for your efforts.
Cheers. And Phil.
No, nothing else for me. It was a good meeting. Thanks.
Great stuff. What I'll do is I'll just quickly wrap up. I've really enjoyed the meeting. It's been really interesting to hear everyone's views. And as a kick-off, I think we've done a bit of good work today. It's great to have such a variety of people here. It's a bit different to the BIM for HA's group in that respect. So I think that could be a real strength for us. I'll go away and do some work on this and get some notes and stuff out. And if I can just ask for your continued energy and interest as it's been today, that'll be amazing. So thanks everyone for your time and have a great week.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.